Ryan Carter's head was pounding. The last thing he remembered was his ship spiraling out of control, alarms blaring in his ears as he plummeted through the alien atmosphere. Now, as he blinked awake, his first thought was, "I survived." He groaned, pushing himself up from the cracked ground. Smoke curled around him, rising from the remains of his escape pod, which was now just a twisted heap of metal. His Earth-made spacesuit had held up, barely. The air smelled thick, metallic, with a strange heat that wasn't from the crash. He barely had time to take in his surroundings before a sharp voice cut through the haze. "Stay down, human." Ryan froze. A shadow loomed over him, and before he could react, something cold and deadly pressed against his throat. A weapon. His breath hitched. He didn't know what it was. Some kind of spear, maybe? A blade? But the intent behind it was clear. He looked up slowly, heart hammering. And that's when he saw her. She was no ordinary soldier. She stood with a kind of confidence that came from knowing she could kill him in an instant. The golden insignia on her armor gleamed even in the dim light, marking her as someone important. Her grip on the weapon didn't waver, not even for a second. "You are the Prophesied one," she said, as if the words held the weight of 1,000 years. Ryan blinked. "What?" Sorry, I think you've got the wrong guy." Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked irritated. "Do not mock our traditions, human." "I'm not." "Wait, seriously, what prophecy?" Before she could answer, a deafening explosion shook the ground. Ryan barely had time to register it before another blast followed, sending fire and debris into the air. Enemy attack. She cursed in her language, her eyes snapping toward the smoke in the distance. Without hesitation, she grabbed Ryan by the arm and hauled him to his feet. He barely had time to protest before she pushed him behind a fallen structure. "Stay down," she ordered. Ryan peered over the rubble. Figures moved in the distance, dark silhouettes with glowing weapons. His heart pounded harder. He might not know much about this planet, but he definitely knew when someone was trying to kill him. The woman beside him pulled a second weapon from her belt, her stance shifting into battle mode. Ryan took a slow breath. He had no weapons, no armor, no clue what was happening. But he had one thing going for him. He was really good at thinking fast. "Okay," he whispered. "So, what's the plan?" She didn't even glance at him. "We fight." Ryan exhaled sharply. "Right, of course, because that's the normal reaction to a surprise ambush." The enemy soldiers were getting closer. Ryan could hear their heavy footsteps, the charged hum of their weapons. He had to do something. Fast. His eyes darted around, taking in their surroundings. Then he spotted it. An old power generator, its control panel flickering weakly. He grinned. "You know, I might have a better idea." The warrior woman gave him a skeptical look, but didn't stop him as he sprinted toward the console. Sparks flew as he yanked off the access panel, fingers flying over unfamiliar controls. The enemy soldiers rushed forward, raising their weapons. Ryan hit the final switch. A surge of energy crackled through the air. The damaged generator overloaded, sending a pulse of electricity through the battlefield. The enemy's weapons flickered, then short-circuited completely. Silence. Then, the warrior woman turned to him, eyes filled with something between shock and pure disbelief. "You fight without honor," she muttered. Ryan shrugged. "I fight to win." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, without another word, she grabbed his arm again and pulled him forward. "Come," she said. "Your fate is already sealed." Ryan groaned. "Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of." And just like that, he was dragged into a war, a prophecy, and, apparently, a very complicated relationship. Ryan barely had time to process what just happened. One minute, he was crash-landing on an alien planet, and the next, he was being dragged through a battlefield by a warrior woman who seemed convinced he was some kind of chosen one. He didn't even know her name yet. The night sky above them was thick with smoke, lit up by distant fires. The ground trembled with the echoes of battle, but the woman moved quickly, weaving through ruined structures with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times before. Ryan, on the other hand, stumbled behind her, still trying to catch his breath. "Mind telling me where we're going?" he asked. She didn't slow down. "Somewhere safe." Define safe. because nothing about this situation feels remotely safe. She shot him a sharp look, but didn't reply. Ryan sighed. All right, fine. But can we at least start with something simple, like your name? For a moment, she didn't answer. Then, as if deciding he had earned it, she spoke. Soraya. Ryan nodded. Okay, Soraya. Cool name. Now, maybe you can explain why you called me the Prophesied one before we get ambushed again. Soraya didn't stop moving, but her grip on his wrist tightened slightly. You wouldn't understand, she said. Ryan scoffed. Try me. She hesitated, then finally sighed. The prophecy speaks of a human who will arrive from the sky when our world stands on the edge of war. He will bring change. Whether it leads to victory or destruction depends on his actions. Ryan blinked. That's it. That's the whole prophecy. Soraya stopped so suddenly that he almost ran into her. She turned to face him, her expression serious. It is more than just words. The elders have waited for generations. And now, you are here. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, but that doesn't mean I'm the guy. I'm just some pilot who crashed in the wrong place at the wrong time. Soraya's eyes searched his face as if trying to find something hidden. The prophecy does not lie. Ryan groaned. Okay, but what if? A sudden noise cut him off. A low, mechanical whirring. Soraya reacted instantly, shoving Ryan behind cover. He barely had time to react before a massive drone-like machine hovered into view. It was sleek, black, and deadly, its energy core pulsing with red light. Ryan tensed. That's not one of yours, is it? Soraya didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out a small curved blade and crouched low, studying the drone's movements. Ryan's heart pounded. He had no weapon, no armor, just his wits. And right now, his instincts screamed run. But Soraya wasn't running. She was waiting. The drone scanned the area, its sensors sweeping across the ruins. Then, with a sudden beep, it turned directly toward them. Ryan cursed under his breath. Well, there goes stealth. Soraya didn't hesitate. With a single, fluid motion, she leaped from cover and hurled her blade. The weapon spun through the air, striking the drone's exposed core. Sparks erupted as the machine jerked violently, then crashed to the ground in a smoking heap. Ryan blinked. Okay, that was awesome. Soraya retrieved her blade without a word, but there was the tiniest hint of a smirk on her lips. Ryan exhaled. All right, fine. Maybe the prophecy has a little truth to it, but if I'm supposed to save your world, we need to set some ground rules. Soraya raised an eyebrow. Rules? Yeah, Rule 1, no dragging me into fights without warning. Rule 2, if we're working together, I need a weapon. Soraya considered this, then finally nodded. Agreed. Ryan grinned. See? That wasn't so hard. She started walking again, and this time, she didn't drag him. Ryan followed, his mind racing. He wasn't sure if he believed in prophecies, but one thing was clear, his life had just become a lot more complicated. Ryan followed Soraya through the ruins, his boots crunching over broken stone. His mind still spun from everything that had happened. Less than an hour ago, he was just a lost pilot trying to survive a crash. Now he was apparently the prophesied one, whatever that meant. Soraya moved with purpose, scanning the dark alleyways as they walked. The night air smelled of metal and smoke, and distant echoes of battle rumbled through the city. Ryan didn't know who was fighting, but he had a strong feeling he was right in the middle of it. So, he said, breaking the silence, since I'm the chosen one and all, what exactly am I supposed to do? Do I get some kind of grand speech? The mission briefing. Soraya didn't look at him. You will learn in time. Ryan sighed. Yeah, see, that's not gonna work for me. I like knowing why people are trying to kill me. She finally stopped walking and turned to face him. You wish to survive, yes. Obviously. Then do as I say. Ryan folded his arms. You know, for someone who just met me, you're awfully bossy. Soraya's expression didn't change. A leader must be decisive. Great, but here's the thing, Soraya. If you expect me to help, I need more than cryptic prophecy talk. I need facts. She studied him for a moment, as if debating whether to tell him more. Then she sighed. Fine, But not here. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Oh, so now you can explain things. Soraya ignored him and kept walking. He followed, shaking his head. After a few minutes, they reached an abandoned building that looked slightly less destroyed than the others. Soraya led him inside and secured the entrance before motioning for him to sit. Ryan leaned against a broken table, arms crossed. All right, let's hear it. Soraya sat across from him, her expression serious. Our world is at war. The enemy seeks to control everything. Our land, our people, our future. They believe might alone determines power. Ryan nodded slowly. And you're fighting back. Yes, but we are losing. Ryan frowned. What does that have to do with me? Soraya hesitated, then spoke carefully. The prophecy says a human will turn the tide, that he will break the enemy's power, not with brute strength, but with something far greater. Ryan leaned forward. And what's that? Soraya held his gaze, his mind. Ryan blinked. Wait, hold on. You're telling me I don't have to fight. Just think my way out of this. Soraya's lips pressed together. Not only think. Strategy is a weapon, but war still demands warriors. Ryan let out a long breath. Fantastic. So I get to use my brain and risk my life. Soraya tilted her head slightly. Is that not what humans do? Ryan chuckled. Some of us, maybe, but I usually try to avoid situations where people want me dead. Soraya stood and walked toward a rack of weapons along the wall. She picked up a sleek, curved blade and tested its weight before turning to him. If you are to survive here, you must learn to fight, she said. Ryan eyed the weapon. I was kind of hoping for a gun. She smirked. Guns run out of power. A blade does not. Ryan sighed but stepped forward. All right, fine. But if I'm going to do this, we need some ground rules. Soraya raised an eyebrow. More rules. Yeah, Rule 1. If I have to fight, I at least get a cool weapon. None of this rusty old dagger nonsense. She considered this, then handed him a different blade, sleek, sharp, and perfectly balanced. He tested its grip and nodded. Okay, this is kinda cool, he admitted. Soraya smirked. Good, then let us begin. Ryan groaned. He had a feeling this was going to be a long night. Ryan barely had time to react before Soraya lunged at him. Her blade flashed under the dim light, slicing through the air toward his side. Whoa, Ryan yelped, stumbling backward. He barely managed to block with his own sword, but the impact sent vibrations up his arm. Are you trying to kill me? Soraya didn't answer. Instead, she attacked again, her movements swift and precise. Ryan clumsily dodged, nearly tripping over his own feet. All right, he said, panting. I think we should start with the beginner lessons, maybe something like how to hold a sword without dying. Soraya stopped and gave him a look of pure disappointment. Your stance is weak. Your grip is uncertain. You fight like someone who expects to lose. That's because I do expect to lose. Ryan shot back. You've been training for years, and I just picked up a sword 5 minutes ago. Soraya studied him for a moment, then sighed. She stepped back, lowering her weapon. Very well. We will go slower. Ryan exhaled in relief. Finally, a little mercy. Soraya motioned for him to stand properly. First, your feet. Widen your stance. Balance is everything. Ryan adjusted his position. Now, your grip. Tight enough for control, but not so tight that you lose speed. He followed her instruction, shifting his fingers around the hilt. Good, Soraya said. Now strike. Ryan hesitated. At you. At me, she confirmed. Ryan swung, a little hesitantly. Soraya blocked it with ease. Again, she ordered. He swung again, blocked. Again. This time, Ryan put more force behind it, but Soraya parried with almost no effort. All right, he muttered. This is getting embarrassing. You are improving, she said, stepping back, but your mind is unfocused. Ryan wiped sweat from his forehead. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe it's the fact that I crash-landed on an alien planet, got called the Prophesied one, and now I'm training with a sword like some kind of medieval knight. Soraya tilted her head. Would you rather be dead? Ryan let out a breath. I mean, when you put it that way. She stepped closer, her voice softer. You doubt yourself. That is your weakness. A warrior does not fight with their hands alone. They fight with their heart. Ryan glanced at her, caught off guard by her sudden intensity. And what if my heart isn't built for fighting? Soraya studied him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she reached out and placed a hand on his chest. You think you are weak, she said quietly. But I see something else. Ryan felt his pulse quicken. Oh yeah, what do you see? Soraya's gaze held his. A man who survived the impossible. A man who, despite his fear, still stands. Ryan swallowed. He wanted to make a joke, lighten the moment, but something in her expression stopped him. He started. You sure you're talking about me? Soraya smirked. We will see. She stepped back, gripping her sword again. Now, again. Ryan sighed but lifted his weapon. This time, when he struck, he did it with confidence. Soraya blocked him, of course, but this time, he swore she actually had to try. The sun was setting behind the jagged peaks of the alien landscape, casting long shadows across the ruins where Ryan and Soraya had been training for hours. Ryan's arms felt like lead, and his entire body ached. It had been an exhausting day of sparring and drills, and to make matters worse, Soraya's relentless push for perfection seemed endless. Are you sure there's no beginner's luck thing happening here? Ryan asked, wiping the sweat from his forehead as he leaned on his sword. Because if there is, I'm definitely out of it. Soraya stood tall, her posture perfect. She didn't even look winded. Luck does not make a warrior, she said, her voice stern but not unkind. Skill does. Right, and skill is definitely something I'm still working on, Ryan muttered, flexing his sore fingers. You are improving, Soraya acknowledged, though her tone was still clipped. But now, you face a test. Ryan straightened up, suddenly alert. A test? You mean, like, another round of sparring? No, Soraya said. She stepped toward him, her eyes narrowing with focus. This is a challenge. A real one. Ryan blinked. What do you mean, a real one? Before Soraya could respond, a loud crash echoed from across the city. The sound of heavy machinery and chaotic shouts filled the air. Ryan's heart rate spiked. What was that? He asked, instinctively gripping his sword tighter. An enemy raid, Soraya replied calmly, her gaze sharpening as she scanned the distance. They are not expecting resistance here, but they are wrong. Ryan frowned. Wait, you mean, this test you mentioned is dealing with an enemy raid? Soraya nodded. You will prove yourself now. In battle. Ryan's eyes widened. Hold up, we never talked about actual fighting. I'm good with strategy, but I'm still figuring out how to swing this thing without cutting off my own foot. Soraya's expression softened, just a fraction. You will not fight alone. You will fight with me. Ryan took a deep breath. This was nothing like what he had imagined when he crash-landed on this alien world. He had been thinking more along the lines of surviving a few awkward diplomatic conversations and maybe a couple of dangerous animals, but a full-blown raid, that was a different story. Okay, he muttered to himself. I can do this, just don't die, Ryan. Soraya moved with swift precision, unsheathing a pair of short blades from her waist. Stay close, she said. Follow my lead, and keep your head. They sprinted toward the sounds of battle, and as they turned a corner, Ryan saw what he feared. A group of heavily armed soldiers, humans, but not like him, fighting against Soraya's people. Ryan's stomach twisted. He had never been in a real fight before, let alone a battle. He had always relied on his brains, outsmarting problems from the safety of his spaceship. But there was no time to think about that now. Soraya was already charging forward, her blades flashing in the fading light. Ryan followed, his feet moving on instinct. He ducked when a blade whizzed past his head, narrowly missing him. His heart pounded in his chest as he lifted his own sword, trying to remember what Soraya had taught him. Focus, Soraya called out. You are not just swinging, you are calculating. Ryan took a breath, focusing on the movement of his enemy. The soldier ahead of him was distracted by a fight with Soraya. With a quick step forward, Ryan thrust his sword toward the enemy's side. It wasn't graceful, but it worked. His sword connected, sending the soldier stumbling back with a grunt. Ryan barely had time to process what had happened before another soldier charged at him. But this time, Soraya was there, effortlessly disarming him with a sharp move. "Stay alert," she warned, her eyes scanning for more threats. Ryan was starting to feel the weight of his sword, his muscles burning from the constant movement. But with each attack and counter, he found himself becoming more attuned to the rhythm of the battle. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was starting to think, starting to calculate. Then, in the chaos of the fight, a loud shout rang out. "Soraya!" A voice cried from the distance. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. He saw Soraya's head snap toward the sound of the cry, and for the first time, there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "We need to go," she said, her voice urgent. "Now." Without another word, she grabbed Ryan by the arm, pulling him through the fray. The battle was far from over, but Soraya was leading him somewhere that would give them a chance to regroup. "Stick close," she said, her voice firm. "This is just the beginning." Ryan nodded, his mind racing as he followed her, ready for whatever came next. Ryan's heart was still racing as he sprinted behind Soraya. The sounds of clashing weapons and angry shouts echoed in the distance, but they were moving fast, away from the chaos of the battle. The world felt like it was spinning around him, his mind still reeling from the fight. "Where are we going?" Ryan gasped, trying to keep up as they ducked into an alleyway. Soraya glanced over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "To the council hall. We need to regroup." Ryan nodded, though he wasn't sure what that meant. He had never felt more out of his depth. He had survived the crash, but now, he was involved in a war, and he didn't even know whose side he was on. The alley they ran through was dark and narrow, with high stone walls rising on either side. As they turned a corner, Ryan saw a group of Soraya's people ahead, standing in formation. They looked ready for a fight, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. "Are we safe here?" Ryan asked, slowing to catch his breath. "For now," Soraya replied. She didn't break stride, though her eyes flicked toward the group of warriors. "But we are not finished. The enemy will not stop." Ryan clenched his fists. "I'm not ready for this. I don't know how to fight like you do." Soraya stopped and faced him, her eyes softening for a moment. "You are stronger than you think, Ryan. But strength is not just in fighting. It's in standing when you want to fall." Ryan stared at her. The tension between them had shifted slightly, from the constant bickering and joking to something deeper. It was a quiet, unspoken understanding. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted quietly. "You have already done more than you think," Soraya said, her voice low but firm. "But you must choose now. Will you stand with us, or run?" Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come right away. He was scared. Of course he was. He was just a man who crash-landed on an alien planet, thrown into a war he didn't understand. But something inside him shifted. He had come this far. He couldn't back down now. "I'm with you," Ryan finally said. "I'll stay." Soraya gave him a nod of approval. "Good. The council will need to hear this." She led him through the narrow streets, and as they reached the heart of the city, Ryan couldn't help but notice how different it looked from the chaos they had just left behind. The council hall stood at the center of the city, its tall stone walls towering above them. Guards stood at the entrance, watching them warily as they approached. "Soraya," one of the guards called, his voice filled with concern. "You're back." "I am," Soraya replied, her tone no nonsense. "We need to speak with the council, now." The guard nodded, stepping aside to let them pass. Inside the hall, the air was thick with tension. A long table sat in the center, surrounded by various leaders from Soraya's people. They all looked at her as she entered, some with respect, others with suspicion. Soraya, one of the leaders, a tall man with silver hair, said, "What news?" Soraya took a breath, then nodded toward Ryan. "This is Ryan. He has chosen to stand with us." The room fell silent. Ryan felt every pair of eyes on him, studying him. "You are the one the prophecy spoke of?" the man with silver hair asked, his voice skeptical. Ryan glanced at Soraya, unsure of what to say. "Bah, I don't know about a prophecy," he began. I don't know why I'm here, but I'm not leaving. I want to help." Soraya stepped forward, her gaze steady. He is more than he realizes. He has fought already, and he will fight again. There was a long pause. The room seemed to hold its breath as the leaders exchanged glances. Finally, the silver-haired man nodded. "Then we will accept your help, Ryan," he said. "But know this, the price of battle is steep. You will not leave this war unchanged." Ryan swallowed hard, his nerves settling in his stomach. "I don't expect to," he said quietly. Soraya turned to him, her eyes soft but intense. "There is no turning back, Ryan. Not now." Ryan nodded. He was scared, but he couldn't back out. He had made his choice, and he was going to see it through. The weight of the decision settled heavily on Ryan's shoulders as he followed Soraya into the war room. The walls of the council hall were lined with ancient tapestries depicting the history of Soraya's people, and the air was thick with tension. Ryan was still trying to make sense of everything. Just hours ago, he was an average guy, thrown into a strange and dangerous world. Now he was being treated like some sort of hero. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that he was missing a piece of the puzzle. Why had Soraya been so certain he was the one from the prophecy? And why had the council agreed to trust him so quickly? Soraya noticed his furrowed brow. "What's troubling you?" she asked, her voice soft, yet firm. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I can live up to whatever they're expecting." She paused for a moment, considering his words. "It's not about being ready. It's about doing what you can, even when you're not sure how." Ryan looked at her, appreciating the sincerity in her eyes. He hadn't known her long, but there was something about her that made him feel like he wasn't entirely alone in this. Before he could respond, a loud voice broke through the silence. "Enough with the doubts. The enemy will not wait for us to feel ready." The man with silver hair from the council stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "We have a war to win. It's time we stopped hiding behind walls and faced the truth. The enemy has no mercy, and neither should we." Ryan glanced at Soraya, who gave him a reassuring nod. He knew this was it. There was no turning back. The council leader's voice softened, but there was still an edge of urgency in his words. "The prophecy says the one from another world will help us defeat the invaders. But how, exactly, we are supposed to achieve victory with someone like him?" He gestured toward Ryan. "Is still unclear." Ryan felt a surge of anger. "You can't just write me off because I'm not one of you," he said, stepping forward. "I may not have the skills you do, but I've survived. I've fought, and I'm here because I want to help you win." The room went silent as everyone turned to him. Soraya's eyes met his, and for a brief moment they shared an unspoken understanding. The council leader raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed by Ryan's words. "Perhaps you are more than I thought, but words mean little in a war. We will see if you can back them up when the time comes." Ryan nodded, knowing that talk wouldn't win the battle, but the words still meant something. They had to. "Enough," Soraya said, cutting through the tension in the room. "The battle is approaching. We need a plan." She turned to the map displayed on the wall, showing the terrain where the enemy had been spotted. Ryan followed her gaze, trying to get a sense of the battlefield. "We know where they will strike," Soraya continued, "but we need to lure them into a trap. The enemy thinks they have the advantage because they outnumber us, but they don't know what we're capable of." Ryan glanced at her, impressed by the confidence in her voice. "What's the plan?" Soraya's gaze locked onto his. "You will lead a group into the heart of the enemy camp. You'll act as bait to draw them out. Once they're exposed, we'll take them down." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. "Wait. What? You want me to be the bait?" She nodded. "You'll have a small team with you for backup, but you must be the one to lead them in." Ryan's mind raced. He wasn't a soldier. He didn't have the training or the experience. But there was no backing out now. Soraya was right. If he wanted to survive, if he wanted to make a difference, he had to take the risk. "Okay," he said, his voice steady. "I'll do it." Soraya gave him a rare smile, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. "I knew you would." The door to the war room opened, and the sound of boots marching in rhythm echoed down the hallway. It was time. The battle was coming, and there was no more time for doubts. Ryan turned to face Soraya, and for the first time since landing on this alien planet, he felt a spark of hope. He wasn't alone. They were in this together. "Let's win this," Ryan said, his voice determined. Soraya's smile widened. "Together we will." And with that, they headed out to face the enemy. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and the distant rumble of approaching warships. Ryan's heart raced as he stood beside Soraya, watching their forces prepare for the final assault. It had all come down to this moment. The plan was set, the enemy was closing in, and there was no turning back. "Are you ready?" Soraya asked, her voice calm but filled with the weight of the moment. Her eyes held his for a brief moment, and Ryan felt the familiar warmth flood through him. Despite the chaos surrounding them, being with her in this moment gave him a sense of certainty. Ryan nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure if he was ready. This wasn't the same as facing off against a hostile group on Earth. These were alien forces with technology far beyond anything he had ever encountered. But he couldn't back out now, not after everything they had been through. "Ready as I'll ever be," he replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The plan was simple in theory, but dangerous in execution. Ryan's team would draw the enemy into an open field by pretending to retreat. Once they were surrounded, the reinforcements would strike from hidden positions, trapping the invaders between two fronts. It was a risk, but it was their only chance. As Ryan watched Soraya issue orders to the soldiers, he realized just how much he had come to trust her. She wasn't just a fierce warrior. She was a leader, and he had no doubt that together they would defeat the enemy. But there was still a nagging doubt at the back of his mind. He was supposed to be the Prophesied one, but he didn't feel anything special. He didn't have any magical powers or hidden skills. He was just a guy from Earth who happened to be in the right place at the right time. "Focus, Ryan." Soraya's voice cut through his thoughts. "It's time." He gave her a quick nod, shaking off his doubts. The time for thinking was over. It was time to act. The signal was given, and Ryan's team began their retreat, running across the barren landscape toward the waiting enemy forces. As expected, the invaders followed quickly, eager to take advantage of what they assumed was an easy victory. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest as he led the group deeper into the trap. The terrain around them was rough, rocky, and unforgiving, but Ryan kept his focus on the task at hand. Every step brought them closer to the moment when they would be surrounded. And then, when the reinforcements struck, they would have their chance to turn the tide of the war. The ground suddenly shook beneath their feet as the sound of enemy warships grew louder. Ryan glanced over his shoulder, seeing the dark silhouettes of their enemies closing in fast. They were almost there. And then, as if on cue, the ambush began. From the surrounding hills, Soraya's reinforcements charged in, their weapons flashing as they engaged the invaders from all sides. The battle erupted in a cacophony of sound, blaster fire, explosions, and the screams of warriors clashing on the battlefield. Ryan's team fought bravely, but there was no time to waste. He had to stay focused. He had to trust Soraya's plan, and most of all, he had to survive. As the battle raged on, Ryan found himself in the thick of it, ducking behind rocks, using whatever cover he could find. He was outnumbered, but he fought with everything he had, remembering the words Soraya had said to him before. "Fight as if it's your last battle, because it might be." The seconds felt like hours as the chaos unfolded around him. Blasts rang out, and soldiers on both sides fell. The invaders seemed relentless, but so were they. With Soraya at the front, leading the charge, it felt as though they could overcome anything. But even in the midst of battle, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. He couldn't explain it, but there was a sense that the end was drawing near. "Soraya," he shouted, spotting her on the far side of the battlefield. She was engaged in a fierce duel with the enemy commander, her blade flashing in the sunlight. Ryan rushed toward her, his heart hammering in his chest. She noticed him and, with a swift motion, incapacitated her opponent. She turned to him, her expression serious. "It's over, Ryan. We've won." But Ryan shook his head. Not yet. The ground suddenly trembled again, and a massive warship descended from the sky. It was unlike anything they had seen before, larger, faster, and more dangerous. Soraya's eyes widened. This wasn't part of the plan. Ryan took a deep breath. He knew what he had to do. Then we'll make our own plan. And with that, they charged forward together, ready to face whatever came next.